Hey everybody, thank you so much for being very patient. You didn't have much of a choice, I'm really sorry, but we finally have the video working. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start recording. So if anybody's given up, we will have the replay for you. So I apologize for that. But let me introduce Susan Spann. She is a publishing attorney, which is what she's here in that capacity today. She's also an author herself, and so she can speak very directly to the needs and things that we want. So let me just pass you over to Susan, and then I'm going to hop over and help the people who are messaging me having trouble getting on. I'm going to hop over and help them get on. Okay.
Great. So I should just get started then, yes? Good afternoon. I am Susan Spann. I am a publishing attorney and also an author. I write both blogging and novels for publication. I have written some articles, and I represent a number of authors, traditionally published, author publishers, and hybrid authors. And so one of the topics that's very near and dear to me and close to my heart is helping author publishers manage their legal rights, which is not that I don't care about authors who are traditionally published, of course. I mean, that is obviously another choice that authors can make. However, very often when an author chooses traditional publication, they have a lot of options in terms of other people who will be involved, whether they want them involved or not, who will have a hand in managing certain types of rights and certain types of issues that author publishers, some people call them self-published authors, some people call them indie authors, and I don't really care which appellation someone wants to use. As a publishing lawyer, I tend to use the term author publisher, in part because I find that author publishers, I'm getting a question or something. Okay. Author publishers, I find, is a great term because it implies something that I find to be very important and very close to my own heart personally, which is the idea that when you elect to become the person who publishes your own works, when you elect to run a publishing house, because that's what you do as an author publisher, it's not a matter of, oh, I did it myself, because a lot of author publishers, many, if not the majority, don't do everything themselves and shouldn't do everything themselves, because not everyone has that kind of skill set to do everything at once. And also, for author publishers, I like calling them author publishers because there's a legitimacy that comes with being a publishing house. And when you publish your own work or you publish someone else's work, you are running a publishing house, and you should have credit for that. And so whether you choose to use the term author publisher, whether you choose to use the term indie published, whether you choose to use the term self-published, it's all the same thing. But the biggest and most important aspect of that is accepting responsibility for the fact that, congratulations, you now own a small business that is somewhat larger than the business of someone who is working with a traditional publishing house, because you get to wear all the hats yourself. And you also have the obligation to do that. So today's webinar is scheduled to run about 2 hours. I will be glad to take questions during the process. I have a window here in front of me that supposedly shows me if you're asking questions. So please feel free to ask questions. In fact, if somebody wants to type in a question just so that I know that questions are working, that's fine too. And I'll be glad to answer questions as I go. Also, should there be a glitch and your question doesn't get answered, please feel free to hook up with me through Laura. I'm glad to answer questions by email, and I'm glad to do that on an ongoing basis. So you don't have to just ask a question today. To the extent that I can, I'll be glad to help just as a pro bono thing relating to this webinar. So just let me know. My email is Susan, S-U-S-A-N, @susanspann.com. So if you're listening to this after the fact, please feel free to shoot me an email if there's a question that you have that doesn't get answered. All right, so today let's talk about protecting your legal rights as an author publisher and how you run that sort of a business. So basically, the issues that author publishers confront fall into 4 different categories, and we're going to discuss each of them today. The first one is financial. The second one is organizational. The third one is rights management based, which incorporates both the rights you license from others, like cover art, and the rights that, or may license from others, and the rights that you have in your work that you license to others in different ways. And so we'll talk about both of those. And then we will also talk about contracts and scam avoidance. And we'll just look at each of them in turn. So we're going to start with the financial area because obviously finances and tax planning are an important thing, but not always the thing you want to be talking about at the end of a 2-hour webinar when your brain might be full. Before I get started, I do have to say a little bit of a disclaimer. Although I am an attorney and licensed in the state of California, I am not an accountant or a CPA. Today's lecture does not create an attorney-client relationship with any person, and today's content is not intended to constitute legal advice to any person. So I am not your lawyer, you are not my client unless we arrange it otherwise, and I advise you to consult with an attorney in your state and or a CPA if you have actual questions about your personal legal rights or would like an individualized analysis of your legal rights and or financial situation. Disclaimer over, we can move ahead. So, income taxes. Some of you may already be familiar with the idea of estimated taxes and quarterly taxes, and many of you may already be experienced author publishers. And so some of what I say may be old hat, but I still want to go over it because it's important to make sure that you have accurate information. And unfortunately, when it comes to taxes, there's a lot of inaccurate information out there. So, authors and other independent contractors pay taxes quarterly. They pay what are called estimated taxes, which means that in each calendar quarter, which ends in March, or in the case of the IRS, April, June, September, and December, you need to get yourself ready to pay your quarterly taxes. You want to make sure that you have a good estimate of how much income you've earned from your writing in that quarter, and also how much writing you expect to earn, how much income you expect to earn from your writing during the course of the calendar year. Because if you have income that spikes, and a lot of us do, where in one quarter you make a lot and other quarters you make less, you may not want to spread out your estimated taxes into even payments in all 4 quarters. You may want to pay a little more in the quarters when you receive more and a little less in the quarters in which you receive less. The biggest thing that you need to make sure you do is make sure that you pay an amount of estimated taxes that is roughly equivalent to the actual taxes you will owe the IRS for income you earn during the calendar quarter for which you're paying. And that involves a lot of estimation and math and deductions and things like that. So I'm not going to go into the details, but I will tell you that if you're earning more than $300 to $500 a year on your writing, you should be aware of estimated taxes and you should be paying them. By the way, the estimated tax due dates are the 15th of April, June, September, and January because the IRS doesn't follow the exact calendar year. What you want to do, if you can, is to set aside part of every payment that you receive, whether you receive it from Amazon, whether you receive it from Smashwords, whether you receive it from individual people who pay you. You want to make sure that you set aside part of every payment you receive on your writing, put it in a separate account if you can, a savings account is great, so that you have the money saved when the time for estimated taxes rolls around. One difficulty is that if you receive $1,000 in January and you may think, wow, this is really cool, I made all this money and I can afford to pay my taxes. By the time April comes, that $1,000 may have found another home somewhere. And the IRS tends not to be very forgiving when it comes to, well, I had the money in January, but now it's gone. So get yourself into the habit of setting aside money for your estimated taxes from the start, and then you will tend to have fewer problems with the IRS down the line. And one of the agencies I like to encourage people not to have trouble with is, in fact, the IRS. So another thing that you want to do with regard to taxes is you want to make sure that you understand the local rules regarding sales taxes in the areas where you sell books. Some ebooks carry sales tax. Most physical book sales carry sales tax. And the sales taxes are normally due to the municipality in which you make the sale, and sometimes also to the municipality in which you're organized. And I strongly recommend that if you sell a lot of books, 50 or more in the course of a year, that you either talk with a CPA in your area or you contact your local sales tax board to make sure that you're complying with the requirements for collecting sales tax and paying sales tax. A lot of times authors actually cover the sales tax because they want the book to come out to an even amount. So they're selling the book for $10, or they're selling the book for $15, or they're selling the book for $5. That's fine, and it's legal, but you are still obligated to pay sales tax if sales tax is due, whether or not you collect extra from the person to whom you made the sale. So you just have to make sure that you know how much the sales tax is on any given sale, that you collect that amount, and that you send it to the relevant taxing agency within the amount of time that you're supposed to have to remit the tax. Otherwise, you can get hit with payments or with penalties, and those penalties are very high. And for most of us, they can easily offset the total income that an author makes from writing in the course of a year. And I'm not seeing, I see a test question from Laura. So I see it, and we will answer it. And hopefully that works. So Laura, I see your test question, and hopefully that was sufficient to make sure that we have questions working. All right. Our next issue that we're going to talk about is deductions, because when you have a business, as self-published or author publishers do, you are going to have deductions that you can take off of your income taxes. And deductions vary. Generally, the rule is that legitimate business expenses, whether they are travel related, whether they are publishing related, so the physical cost of printing the books, things like that, can often be deducted from your income. You want to make sure that you keep all of your receipts, that you document all of your expenses very carefully, and that if you have a great deal of income or a great deal of deductions, that you consult a CPA or someone who's a bookkeeper for you, so that you make sure that you take all of the deductions to which you're entitled, but so that you don't overtake deductions that can get you in trouble. Now, there was a rule that was in place until a couple of years ago. The IRS said that you had to make a profit on a business within a certain number of years. Yes, I see the question there, and I'll get your question in just a second. There was a rule that the IRS had until a couple of years ago, which said that if you didn't make a profit within 2 to 4 years, it would be considered a hobby and not a business. And the IRS recently, hooray for artists, recognized that some artists never make a profit, and the IRS has now rescinded that rule. There is no hard and fast rule that your business becomes a hobby if it doesn't turn a profit. However, the IRS does still tend to audit you if you have a business that does not turn a profit ever and has heavy, heavy subsidization. The good news is that if you have another job and you have enough income to subsidize those deductions, then the IRS tends to not have a problem with it as long as the deductions are legitimate. My recommendation to authors, especially author publishers, is this. You have to keep very careful track of your records. Have physical files as well as electronic files. I have a cell phone, as many of us do. And when I'm traveling for business, I take photographs of my receipts in restaurants, anything that's deductible. I take a photograph of that receipt in addition to keeping the hard copy receipt. And then when I come home, I put those photographs in an electronic file that is labeled travel receipts. And so I have records of the receipts both in electronic and in physical form, and that helps me when it's time to do my taxes. We have a question here that says, I just managed to get on. Do you have any suggestions on tax programs that will allow us to submit sales tax to multiple states easily? I don't have a specific program that I recommend, but I do know that some of the online vendors like Square sometimes have options for handling the sales tax. I also know that if you are selling online through third-party vendors like Amazon and I believe also Smashwords, they will take care of the tax collection and remittance for you. So if they're charging, for example, on Amazon, you don't need to pay the sales taxes for your Amazon sales because Amazon is handling that for you. If you are handling local sales taxes, my recommendation is that you contact the local tax board in your state and ask them if they have a program that they like to use or that they recommend, because it's always easier if whatever you're using works better with your local governmental entity, because they're the one who's most likely to come knocking if something is out of whack. So hopefully that answers your question. Next question, we've dealt with deductions. The takeaway from all of the financials, by the way, get an accountant if you need to. As long as you have the skills to handle the accounting for your business, it's often less expensive to do it yourself. I do have 2 what are called Schedule C businesses. A Schedule C business is a business where you are self-employed or you own the business. And so for most of you, your writing will be a Schedule C, unless you have a corporation or another business entity, and we'll talk about that in a minute. When you're running a Schedule C business, there are lots of good software programs like TurboTax and similar things like that that can help you with your bookkeeping. Quicken and QuickBooks, those sorts of things are very helpful too. You just need to find the ones that work for you and that help you to keep better track of your records, because ultimately it's less about worrying about getting audited for taking the wrong deductions for most of us, and more about making sure that if you do get audited, you have the documentation to back it up. One quick piece of advice that I've not given, or information, I have to be careful as a lawyer not to use the word advice. One piece of information that I have used, that I've not given out before, that I think is helpful to people is this. When you're keeping track of your records, should you ever be audited by the IRS? First of all, make sure you get an accountant to help you with the defense, because most of us cannot handle that alone, and you don't want to go up against the IRS even if you're legitimately not in trouble, because it just can be very stressful, and it's helpful to have someone who understands the process. The second recommendation that I make is make sure that you photocopy all of your receipts and hole punch them and place them in a 2-ring binder or a 3-ring binder with an index that shows exactly what all of the receipts are and what they were for. The more organized you are when you show up to an audit or to any inquiry about your finances, the better you will come out of it. And I have actually had a client who was audited by the IRS for a author-publisher situation and helped her assemble her receipts together. And the auditor actually took one look at the 3 binders she brought in with all of her receipts and said, I will review these and let you know if we need to be back in contact. And the auditor actually called them the next day and said, we agree with you, you don't owe anything. And so while I'm not making any representations that that will happen to you, I can tell you that the more organized you are, the better you tend to be in the end, as long as you've been honest to begin with. And I always recommend that you're honest to begin with your taxes, because the IRS is not a group you want to try and get away with causing problems with. So the next question that we want to talk about here is managing those costs and expenses, because as an author publisher, you are running a publishing house, and publishing houses should have a budget. So you as an author publisher should have a budget, and it shouldn't just be a random budget. It should be you should have enough records and enough information that if someone comes to you, like me, and says, do you know exactly how much you spent on your last release? How much did you spend on advertising? Where were those advertising dollars spent? Which of those advertising dollars converted into sales? How many sales converted from your advertising? If you don't have this information available and you can't break down your numbers to get there, you're not going to be as effective at selling books as someone who does know those numbers. I happen to know a author publisher in my area, in the Sacramento area, who's been very successful. And when I asked these questions at an author publisher talk that I gave a few weeks back, and I asked people to raise their hands, who knows exactly how many of their advertising dollars converted into sales and which ones were ineffective? Her hand went right up in the air. She knew how much she had spent. She knew where she had spent it. She even knew the conversion rates and the click-through rates for all of her advertising. And that was really helpful. So the question becomes, how do you make that happen? How do you keep those kinds of records? And what I recommend is that you use either notebook paper or a computer, depending on what your preferences are, to create spreadsheets. And the spreadsheet should have columns. And it should have a column for how much was spent, where it was spent, what, if you can tell, was the click-through rate, because a lot of times if you advertise on Facebook or on Goodreads or places like that, you will get figures like your click-through rate, which is basically the rate, the percentage of people who saw your ad who clicked through the link, either to your website, to Amazon, to wherever that link went. You are looking for a click-through rate around 1%. If your click-through rates are below 1%, then you probably are not getting as much effective use out of that advertising as you could. And if you're higher than 1%, then that ad is doing very well for you. You can't always tell how many of those clicks are going to convert to sales, but you can usually guess, because maybe you don't see how many sales it caused, but if you see that there were 150 click-throughs, let's say on a certain day, and you sold 25 books that day, well, it's not a guarantee that every one of those click-throughs was responsible for one of those sales. There's a fairly high correlation. So these are the kind of information that you should be not just throwing money away and not paying attention to what happens, but you should be looking at your results. You should be analyzing it. And then when you get ready to go to your next book and your next advertising, you'll be able to tell which advertising dollars were effective and which ones were not. And what I recommend, both for traditionally published authors and for author publishers, as well as hybrid authors, obviously, is that with every new book you release, you should continue to do all the things that were successful for you. And you should try at least 1 to 2 new advertising options, reasonably priced, that you did not do before. And then you should pay attention to what's working and what's not working. Realize that some things may work well with one book or one genre or one type of book, but not work so well for others. And if you have all of that information, then you will be able to better prepare for your next launch, which kind of feeds into my next point, which is that you should have not only a budget spreadsheet for every book, you should actually have a business plan for every book. Now, in a 2-hour session, we don't really have time to go through all of the elements of the author business plan. However, writing a business plan is something that a lot of people don't know how to do. And I do have blog entries on my blog right now, and the blog is at susanspann.com, that talk about specifically and in detail how to write a business plan for your book. There is an entry for each step of the business plan that talks not only about what a business plan is, but how you write it on a book-by-book basis. And it's acceptable to have a business plan for your whole author-publisher business as well, but I strongly recommend writing one for every book. In fact, even though my books are traditionally published, I write a business plan for every book so that I know what to do. Your spreadsheet for your advertising expenses, it actually goes into the financial component of the business plan, along with your spreadsheet for costs of things like cover art, editing if you pay for outside editing. And by building a business plan for every book, you're not only establishing a plan that will help you launch more successfully, but you're also establishing data that you will be able to go back and mine into later on to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And that is probably the biggest gold mine that comes out of a business plan, especially for author publishers. Traditionally published authors don't get a lot of this information. They may not know what all the advertising is, and they may not know what all the advertising is that was effective, because the publisher doesn't share their data. Only the author only knows what he or she does on her own. As an author publisher, you have access to all the information. That makes you very, very powerful in the publishing industry, because you have access to numbers that other authors don't. So don't ignore them, and don't have them but not use them. Find a way to use them effectively. And even if you haven't been doing that yet, it's never too late, even for your books that are already out there. So let's move on to our next area, which is organizational issues, specifically whether or not you should be a sole practitioner, sole proprietor, running a business by yourself, or whether you should have a corporation or an LLC. We'll also talk about whether you should use a pen name, and whether or not it's a good idea to have an imprint. So we'll talk about all of those things in the time to come. So if you publish only your own works, generally speaking, the answer to should I have a corporation, should I incorporate, should I become an LLC, which is a limited liability company, that's a structure that's very similar to a corporation, but has fewer maintenance obligations in some ways, and doesn't have to file its own tax returns. The answer to that question really depends on why you want one. Most authors are surprised to learn that an LLC or a corporation does not actually protect you normally, and in most states, against legal liability for things like defamation or copyright infringement of other people's work, or other things for which you might be sued as an author. Normally, those don't help. The corporation doesn't help at all. It is not true that if you publish your books through a corporation instead of as an individual, nobody can ever come for you if you make a mistake or do something wrong. The reason for that is that the law recognizes something called piercing the corporate veil. And piercing the corporate veil means that if the person who owns a corporation does something wrong, then the law allows people who want to sue that person to pierce through the corporation and actually sue the person who's responsible. Basically, the short form for that is that the law doesn't let you set up essentially an artificial shield to protect you against yourself. When you sign a contract with a traditional publishing house, that contract contains what's called an indemnity clause. And that's a clause that says you, the author, agree to protect the publisher against anything that you do wrong in your books. Illegal content, defamation, slander, which, by the way, those are the same ones in writing generally, and one is verbal, libel and slander, or anything else, pardon me, that you do wrong, you're responsible. The same is true if you own the corporation. The reality is that if someone's going to sue you as an author publisher, they're going to sue you. They're not likely to sue your company. The exception to that is that if you publish other people as well as yourself, and many author publishers do this, they start off publishing their own work, but then over time, because their imprint becomes successful, they want to publish other people so that other people can benefit from the unity of having the same imprint, the same publisher publish both authors. As soon as you start publishing other people, you definitely want a limited liability company or a corporation. And the reason for this is that you should have contracts with those people whose work you publish. And those contracts should contain an indemnity clause in which they promise to protect you. They promise to protect the publisher. The publisher is going to be your corporation or your LLC. And the reason for that is that in that case, if someone sues the publisher, it is the publisher and that structure will protect you. So short form, normally a corporation or LLC will not protect you if it's your own work you're publishing, but it normally will protect you if you're publishing someone else. So at whatever point you plan to start publishing other people, that is normally, but not always, the point at which you want to incorporate. Again, the laws in different states vary, and I strongly advise you to talk with a lawyer in your state to make sure this is the case in your state, because some states differ, and you want to make sure that you have the legal advice that is tailored to you and your state. So if you have any questions about whether or not you actually should form a corporation or an LLC, please do not rely on this webinar. Please talk to a lawyer. However, these are some general guidelines that you can use. You should be aware that you should never, ever, ever, ever publish anyone else's work without a professionally written publishing contract. And the reason for that is that there are protections that you as an author publisher are going to need, and you don't want to end up on the hook for mistakes that someone else makes. You want to make sure that they're on the hook and that they're agreeing to protect you. We'll talk more about that when we get to a little bit about, we're talking about contracts, but I just wanted to put that out there to begin with. Also, author publishers very often will co-author works, and I write a lot of contracts for co-authored works. So this is you and somebody else writing together. Please, please, please get a contract before you start writing a co-authored work, because curiously, in my experience, every single time there's been a contract in place before the writing was started, if there were disputes, they were easily resolved, and it didn't end up ruining people's friendships, and it didn't end up ruining people's business relationships. Every single time that the cart went before the horse and the writing got started or the planning got started before the contract was in place, bad things happen, it ends poorly for everyone, and friendships and business partnerships end up being destroyed, and people end up threatening to sue one another, and it's just not good. So no matter how well you're getting along with your business partner or writing partner, please make sure you have a contract in place, get it written by a lawyer or by somebody who knows what they're doing. Don't write it yourself, and please don't pull it off the internet, because there are some really bad contracts on the internet. You're probably looking at just a couple $100s to get a contract like that written, and it will save you thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars later on. When you write that contract, please make sure that it covers not only what happens when things go well, but what happens if somebody decides they don't want to finish the book, what happens if somebody decides that once the book is finished, they don't want it published, what happens if somebody decides down the road that they don't want you selling the film rights. All of these things are things you need to think about in advance, and you need to talk through while everyone's getting along, so that when people don't get along, at least there's not something else to argue about, because you may not be happy with it, but you can point to the contract and say, okay, well, yeah, that's what we agreed on. Let's talk for a minute about imprints, because imprints are something that a lot of author publishers use and sometimes don't understand completely. So an imprint is the name under which a publishing house publishes its works. Most of the large publishing houses have multiple imprints. So for example, Macmillan Publishers has the imprint St. Martin's Press. They also own the Minotaur imprint, under which they publish mystery novels. And so you have one publishing house, but they sort of organize and collect their works under smaller titles, and those titles are imprints. Imprints are normally either divisions of a larger publishing house, or they are what are called fictitious business names that identify divisions of a publishing house. If you are an author publisher, many times you will also want to have an imprint, even if you are only publishing your own work. And a lot of times authors do this because they feel that it gives them legitimacy, right? If your books are published by you, then on Amazon it says published by, publisher is you. But if it says publisher and then something else, Blue Lion Books, or fantasy inspired or whatever, that is the imprint that you're using. Many authors don't realize that an imprint is actually what's called a fictitious business name. And so if you're using an imprint, but you don't have a corporation or an LLC, you don't have an entity, what you want to do is register that fictitious business name in the county where you live and do business. And so that's a very simple process. It usually ranges somewhere between $15 and $50 for the registration. I think it's an annual registration in most counties. You want to go down to the county offices and just ask them, business licenses. Where do I need to deal with a fictitious business name? Now, this is not the same as a business license. It is a fictitious business name. Sometimes you may need a business license, sometimes you may not. This varies dramatically across counties and regions. So make sure that you know what the rules are in your state, in your county. But if you're going to use an imprint, you generally need to register it as a fictitious business name, and you need to maintain that registration. You can't simply use a fictitious business name without properly registering it. By the way, Amazon will let you say that your publisher name is whatever you want. They have no responsibility for whether or not you're compliant with law. So please don't say, well, Amazon didn't ask me to do this, so I don't need to. Not true. Amazon will gladly let you hang yourself if it gets the money. So just be aware of that. And by the way, I'm not down on Amazon. I'm not up on Amazon. Amazon is a corporation. Corporations do what they were designed to do. Amazon's design is to sell all the things and to make as much money selling all the things as possible. And so within that, where they can be a good business partner for us and where they can help us sell all the things, it's fine to work with them. Do not trust them. They would probably shiv you in an alley if they could, but you know what? So would anyone else on the planet. One of the important things, especially for author publishers to realize, is that you will have many business partners and business associates. Business partners, although we can be friends with them, should not be mistaken for close friends or family. We should respect them. We should treat them appropriately in a business context. And we should always remember that they're out to make a living just as we are out to make a living, and that some people do that with more respect and courtesy than others. So be nice to everyone, watch your back, walk softly, and carry as big a stick as possible. So imprints, we've talked about imprints. Next thing I want to talk about is pen names. Oh, imprints, by the way, they're not liability shields. Just like a corporation or an LLC won't necessarily protect you, an imprint will not protect you. If you just create a fictitious business name, you're not allowed to then turn around and say, oh, I didn't publish it. Blue Lion Publishing published it. No, a court will not buy that. A judge will not buy that, and you will still be in trouble. The best advice is don't break the law when you publish books. Pen names. Pen names or pseudonyms are when an author uses a name not their own to publish books. Again, very common in publishing, totally legal, and you generally do not have to register your pen name as a fictitious business name unless you are receiving checks in your pen name, and most authors don't receive checks in their pen name. Most authors, even if they publish under their real names, will have their account with Amazon, or if they publish under a pen name, will still have their account with Amazon or Smashwords or whatever in the real name. This is advisable because your bank may not be quick to accept a check made out to, Jimmy Sparkle if your actual name is Susan Spann. The bank will say, I don't know who Jimmy Sparkle is. Do you have ID showing Jimmy Sparkle? And of course I would say no. By the way, I don't write under Jimmy Sparkle. If you want that name, knock yourself out. But what you want to make sure is that if you do business, sign contracts in a pseudonym, that you do have that registered as a fictitious business name. Otherwise, you can use a pseudonym for pretty much any legal purpose that you want. You just need to make sure that where you sign contracts, you sign them in your legal name, writing as whoever. Be aware that, like an imprint, a pen name is not a liability shield. Traditional publishers will throw people right under the bus, even if they have a pen name in place. If someone tries to sue that author, the publisher will be the first to say, oh, it's not Jimmy Sparkle, it's Susan Spann. And they should. Legally, they have the right to do that. So you, as an author publisher, need to be aware you can't hide behind a pen name if someone tries to sue you. They will be able to uncover who you are. They will be able to come after you directly. Again, the best way to avoid problems with this is don't break the law. You want to make sure that if you are going to use a pen name as an author publisher, that you have a plan for use of that pen name in advance. You don't want to end up in a situation where you don't know what you're doing and you publish this book under this name and that book under that name and the names aren't connected. There are really a couple of cardinal sins that I've seen authors, especially author publishers, commit in this realm. But by the way, I've seen traditionally published authors commit them as well. So these are not sins which have any location or tie to publishing path. They are much more character related than publishing path related. One of them, and the one that ends up getting people in perhaps the most trouble on the internet, is the idea of sock puppeting. So for those who are not aware of the idea of sock puppets, the idea of sock puppets originated with blogging, I believe, but it's the idea that you have one identity in which you write or blog, and then you create other identities, fictitious or real if you're already using a fictitious identity, and you have those other identities positively reinforce, comment on, review things that you do in your other name. So for example, if you write as Jimmy Sparkle and then you go online as Susan Spann and you comment on Jimmy Sparkle's blog and say, wow, Jimmy Sparkle, you're the best author ever, and you put 5-star reviews on Amazon, but it's you reviewing you, that's a problem. Because the internet will find out that it's you reviewing you. And the more sock puppets you create, and by the way, there have been some cases where authors have created 5, 10, 15 other fake accounts in order to give themselves more 5-star reviews, you do get found out. And when you get found out, the internet is merciless and your reputation is destroyed because nobody can trust you online anymore, and nobody can trust your reviews anymore because you're creating reviews for yourself. Question that just came up, is there any protection in being a sole proprietor? Is that just a basic business? Sole proprietor is what you are if you don't have any other business structure. So by default, even if you don't realize you're a sole proprietor, you're already a sole proprietor. That's just the name for it. In some counties and some states, there is special protection for a business structure called sole proprietorship. It doesn't exist in all states. So what you want to do is find out if in your state there is protection for sole proprietorship that is beyond what you get for just being self-organized. You can usually find that out through the website of your Secretary of State. So you want to go to your state's Secretary of State. You can Google that. If you live in, say, Washington, you can say Washington, Secretary of State, and you can get the website. And there's usually an information number. And very often there's an information number for sole proprietors. And so you can call that number and you can get a live person on the line and they will be able to answer your questions. They can't give you legal advice, but if you're careful to word your questions in a way that doesn't involve legal advice, things like, for example, is a sole proprietorship something that I have to file paperwork for, or is it automatic? That they can help you with. So I would say just talk with your Secretary of State and they will be able to help you. Shifting modes back to the idea of pen names and sock puppetry, because it's always fun. Make sure if you are going to register a pen name and use it, that you have a plan for how you're going to use that pen name online. Will you have a separate website? Will you keep it completely separate from your real identity? Some authors use a pen name for legal reasons, for legal protection, and they have to be very careful about keeping that identity separate from their actual identity. And if that's the case, then I recommend that you create true separation. Don't review your own books. Don't let your author pen name and your real identity interact with each other online. I do know some authors, curiously, they're traditionally published authors that I'm actually thinking of, not author publishers, who interact online between their pen name and their legal name, and they don't try and hide the fact that they're two different people. They have acknowledged online that they're the same person, and yet they interact with each other. Like they comment on one another's Facebook pages, but it's the same person, and it's really awkward and a little creepy. So don't do that. You know, if you're going to acknowledge that your pen name is also you, that's great, and have a plan for how you're going to do that. You can, of course, if you're upfront about it, I suppose. I mean, it's nothing illegal about commenting on your alter ego's Facebook page. It's, as I said, it's just a little weird and awkward. So if you want to be awkward, embrace it. But otherwise, for most of us, I would say keep a professional distance between your real name and your pen name. One other thing to note, when you register copyrights, and this is actually going to segue into our next topic, which is copyright registration and ownership. When you register copyrights, you need to register the copyright in your legal name as opposed to your pen name, unless there is a reason, for example, a security reason, why you must register in a pen name. Be aware, when you register in a pen name, you will lose some copyright protection. Copyright in the United States lasts for the life of the author plus 70 years, unless you have, as long as it's in the person's real name. If you register in an anonymous work, and a pseudonym counts as an anonymous work for copyright registration purposes, it's either 90 or 95 years from the date of creation, as opposed to life of the author plus. What I normally tell people is if you are older than 65, then you generally don't lose a lot in terms of the way the actual math works out. If you are younger than 65, then I normally recommend, and most authors do, registering the copyright in your legal name as opposed to your pen name. But you must be aware, copyright registration in your legal name is a public document. Anyone can go to the Copyright Office and do a search for your legal name, your pen name, or the title of your book, and they can pull up for free the copyright registration, which means if you write under a pen name, that you register your copyright in your legal name, that is a public record, and anyone with 15 seconds and the ability to run an internet search can find you and will find you. So just be aware when you make your plans about using pen names that you know how you're going to use them and that you have a plan. Moving on. So let's talk a little bit about copyright ownership and registration. Copyright is automatic, and it attaches to qualifying works at the time of their creation and fixation in a tangible medium of expression. Copyright codes are so much fun. Creative works that are covered by copyright include manuscripts, poems, short stories, architecture, photographs. Put a little asterisk by that. We'll be back to it. Manuscripts, short stories, songs, all of these things. Things that are not covered by copyright. Titles. The building blocks of creativity, so generic ideas. Your expression of those ideas does receive copyright protection. And the more detailed your expression is, the stronger the copyright protection becomes. There's actually a really old lawyer joke that talks about copyright being as thin as the phone book. And that's actually like really funny for those of us who are copyright geeks, because there actually is a copyright on the phone book, but it mainly only covers things like the font choice and how many items appear on a page. It doesn't actually cover the names because facts are not subject to copyright. And so the fact of someone's name, address, and phone number is not actually copyrighted. So the copyright protection for the phone book is very thin, even though the phone book itself. And probably I realized half the people attending this webinar or watching this webinar have never seen a phone book. So I'll just retire to my dinosaur closet with that little joke now because it probably doesn't play to a millennial generation. Okay, the benefits of copyright registration. Should I register my copyrights? When should I register my copyrights? Why should I register my copyrights? Copyright protection itself is automatic. You do not have to register your copyright for it to be copyrighted. However, copyright law in the United States gives you certain protections in addition to merely the ability to stop someone else from infringing your copyright. And in order to get those protections, you need to register with the Copyright Office. Registration costs about $35 per manuscript. It can be accomplished at copyright.gov, and they do have a great tutorial that will walk you through the process. Makes it very easy. You want to register in order to maximize your rights within 3 calendar months of initial publication. Now, what is initial publication? That could be the date that if you publish serially, initial publication is the date that the first chapter goes up on your blog. And by the way, even if you're going to publish serially on a blog, you can copyright the whole work, even though you're going to publish it serially. You don't have to copyright each serial installment on its own. So be aware of that. Within 3 months of that first publication date, whether it's ebook, whether it's print, whether it's online, serial, whatever, you want to register your copyright. If your registration is for a work that is electronic only, in other words, if you're not doing print editions, you can accomplish the registration entirely online, and you can upload a copy of the ebook rather than having to send 2 copies of the book to the Library of Congress or to the Copyright Office. If you are doing print and ebook, you will need to send hard copies. And so just be aware of that before you start your registration process. It doesn't cost any more to register. It's just that you will have to then also put out the money for a couple of print copies, which in addition means that you want to make sure that if you're going to e-publish and then maybe do print down the line, that you go ahead and register that copyright while you only have an e-edition so that you can do it within the 30 days and not have to send the print copies. All right. The things that you get for copyright registration. You get the ability to recover your attorney fees if you sue. You get the ability to, and if you prevail, and assuming the person has the money to give it to you. You get the ability, obviously, to stop the infringement, which you already had. And you also typically can claim what's called statutory damages, which are those damages that can be about $10,000 per occurrence for infringement. And those are really nice because you don't have to prove that the person who stole your work made a profit off of it. This is the part where I shift the copyright conversation a little bit, and we stop talking about what people might do to you and start talking about the unfortunate reality of what you might do to other people, sometimes without knowing it. You may have mentioned, and we're going to come back to that asterisk, that I mentioned copyright in photographs. Photographs are all subject to copyright for as long as copyright duration, and it's the same duration, life of the author plus, or for institutional copyrights, 90 years from creation. It's the same copyright as you have in your manuscript. And this is important to know because the internet is crawling with copyright violations when it comes to photographs. Legally, it is copyright infringement to take a photograph you find on the internet and use it. It is infringement to use it on your blog. It is infringement to use it in your cover. It is infringement to use it on Facebook or on Pinterest. Sorry. Sharing things. I usually get the question, what about sharing things on Facebook? Sharing things on Facebook, I have never heard of a lawsuit where someone whose image was infringed sued the people who shared, only the person who originally posted, and only if it didn't constitute fair use. So Facebook is usually a little bit easier, but my recommendation, very strong to people, is this. Do not ever post a photo on Facebook, on Pinterest, on your blog, especially not in your cover art. Do not ever use a photograph online unless you can guarantee one of three things. The first one, you created it yourself. This is the best one, and we're going to talk about this again a little bit more in a minute. The second one, you have a license to use it. And that license means a signed, written permission from the person who actually owns the photo, and you have to be able to document that you have the right person. Because there are some unfortunate cases in recent years where trolls have uploaded copyrighted photos they did not own to freebie photo sites. And unfortunately, that is not a defense. There is no what's called mens rea or intent element in copyright infringement of a photograph. The test the court will follow is, did you own the photo? Yes or no? Did you have permission to use it? Yes or no? If the answer to both questions is no and you used it, you infringed. And then you could be slapped with those $10,000 statutory fines for each image. I had a client who was approached by Getty Images who claimed that their website used 5 infringing images. They had hired a web designer. The web designer had pulled the website images that they used on the website off of an allegedly free photo site, but the images were in fact copyrighted and owned by Getty Images. Getty was claiming $75,000 in fines for those uses. The client went back to the web designer, and they had a contract, by the way, that said they would only use proper images, but they didn't. That was not a defense. My client ended up having to pull the images off their website, and we did negotiate the penalties way down, but it was still a 5-figure settlement, and it still cost my client more than they made in a month to have to pay Getty for something that really was not their fault, but legally it was their fault. So do not use images unless you took them and therefore own them. You can document their provenance and you have a license from the person who owns them. Or 3, they're in the public domain and you know that they're in the public domain. Photos can get into the public domain really in 2 ways. 1, the copyright expires. So the image is old enough that the copyright expired. So, just find photographs from the 1600s and you'll be fine. Hopefully most of you are giggling at that or understand why it's funny. Number 2, go to a documentable site that has public domain photos. A really good one, the US Library of Congress has a lot of documented images. And by the way, not just photographs, artwork this applies to artwork equally well. Drawings, paintings, photographs, any images or artwork, they all are subject to copyright. So the US Library of Congress has a great selection, for example, of 17th and 18th century Japanese woodblock prints, which I use very often on my blog when I need to illustrate old concepts because they're out of copyright. The copyright has expired and I know I can use them. The other thing that I recommend, and this is roaming back around to the idea of own it yourself, most of us have one of these. A cell phone. or mobile phone, I suppose now, or a camera. When you're out and about, I recommend that you shoot your own B-roll. In film and television, B-roll are the shots that are spliced in either before and after the commercial bumpers, or they're shots of things that don't involve the main actors. So photos of a building, photos of a flower, photos of a duck. I take photographs of everything. I take photos of coffee cups. I take photos of dandelions. I take photos of turkeys standing on the roof of my car, which happens on occasion. I take photographs of all different kinds of things, anything I can find. Because then if I want to do a blog about coffee, or I want to do a blog about inspiration, I have a photo of a ladybug crawling on a leaf. Just a random thing that I saw, but I know I can use that image because I own it. This translates also into your cover art. And as an author publisher, you need to be careful because when you're traditionally published, you have a publisher providing that cover art. And should something be wrong with that cover art, they're legally responsible. But if you make the cover or you hire a cover designer, you're legally responsible. So if you design your own covers, and I do not recommend this unless that is your skill set, but if that is your skill set, then make sure that you are purchasing a license from a legitimate licensing site for the artwork that you want to use. And by the way, just taking a photo and changing it does not give you a copyright. You still need permission from the original image holder, even if you're going to modify it. When you deal with your cover art, if you're going to hire a cover designer, you need to be very careful that you either tell them what images they can use, you provide the base images that they're going to modify, or make them provide you with the written licenses and tell them which sites they can use. So for example, require them to use something like Shutterstock or another reliable image licensing group. It will be more expensive. You will probably need to pay for those images, but it is far better for you to pay $50 or even $100 for an image than have Getty breathing down your throat asking for 10,000 multiplied by the number of books you sold if you didn't bother to check the provenance of those images in advance. So I'm not saying everyone will take advantage of you. When I give this talk, I like to tell people that it's a little bit like the migration of the herds across the savannas in Africa, which happens every year. And I have a friend who was in Africa a couple of years ago at the time of the Great Migration and watched as all the wildebeests and the zebras went running across the river. And there are just thousands of them, and they run and they run. And they all know there are crocodiles in the river. And they run across the river anyway, because, you know, hey, what are the odds that I'm going to be the one that the crocodile chooses? Which works out really, really well for everybody except the guy who gets hit by the crocodile. If you're using images that you don't own online, you may be running zebra odds. You may never be caught. But if you are the one who's taken down by the crocodile, it can be fatal for your business. Don't take those odds. Be the safe one who runs along the bank and doesn't go down into the water where the crocodiles are. So let's talk about contracts. I mentioned that you want to have a contract with your cover designer and with everybody else. We have another question. If I purchase a photo license through a stock photo site, not freebie, are my odds better than somebody's bucket of freebie site? Yes. If you are purchasing a license from a reliable source like Shutterstock or some other company that is known and has a good reputation in the industry, then what happens is the photographers who upload their photos, they get a share of the licensing of those photos. And so you are paying for a license that is legitimate because the photographer is getting paid. And normally those sites take responsibility for if the troll uploads the photo, it's the site that's responsible as opposed to you. So yes, if you are purchasing through a non-freebie site and you are paying for a license, you are generally okay. I cannot tell you there will never, ever, ever be a problem because nobody can guarantee never, but I would be more than comfortable with that happening. And most of my clients who license cover art, that's how they do it. They go through, Shutterstock or somebody like that. They pay for a license. And also you should be aware when you sign up for something like that, when you sign up for a licensed site, read the terms of use. I know that those cure insomnia and that nobody actually wants to read them. I write them and I don't want to read them, but you will do much better if you read them because very often the level of license that you have translates to a certain number of copies of the book you're allowed to sell if you use it for cover art. I think that the Shutterstock Professional allows you 10,000 sales. Once you've sold over 10,000 books, you actually need to buy a second license, an expanded license. Yes, that's a problem we should all have, right? But just be aware that that is a situation that you need to track. And you need to, again, in that business plan that you have for your book, all the photo licenses should be there, along with the number of copies that you're allowed to sell before you need to re-up the license, so that when your book takes off, not if, and you sell another 20,000 copies of it, you know that now it's time to go make sure that you've paid up the license if you need to pay up the license. And you should know when that happens. So let's talk about contracts. Contracts are not optional. I actually once had an author publisher say to me, I don't want to deal with contracts, so I'm going to self-publish. And I said, that's a really bad reason to self-publish. You actually have more responsibility for having good contracts when you author publish than when you're with a traditional publisher. And the reason I say that is that when you're with a traditional publisher, they have lawyers. And their lawyers write very, very strong contracts. And they have specialists who understand publishing law working for them. You as an author publisher need to do the same job that any traditional publisher is doing. And by the way, a lot of people don't look at it this way, but when you are an author publisher, you are running a traditional publishing house. It's just that you're both the author and the publisher. Surprise. You know, in one sense, you're not doing anything different than a traditional publisher does. It's just that you're doing it for yourself instead of doing it for other people. And if you start publishing other people's work, you are a traditional publisher. Surprise. Unless you're a vanity publisher or a hack, and please don't do that. So the general rule for contracts is that there's a thing in contract law called the statute of frauds. And the statute of frauds says that any contract which cannot be completed within 1 year must be in writing in order to be valid. This applies very often to copyrights, because if you are licensing work from someone, let's say to use as your cover, you're going to continue to publish that book for more than a year. So you need to have a written contract. You also need to have a written contract, because if you don't, it can be very difficult for you to prove that you have the right to use that image, that you have the right to use that cover as you go. So should you have a falling out with the cover designer and they come back and say, oh, I never said that you could use that art for the cover, that wasn't final. Or, oh, I never said you could sell that book in print. You need to have a document that you can point to that says, no, 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 we do. See, here's my license right here. So everything that you do, everyone that you work with as an author publisher, you must have a contract. Now, if you are publishing through a source like CreateSpace or Amazon, you do have a contract. It's called the Terms of Use, which I'm sure all of you read in detail and understood absolutely, right? Yeah, hope so. If you didn't, please go read them. Those govern the terms just as if you had signed them in writing. So be aware when you click I accept on those terms of use, you are accepting a legally binding contract. You should know what it says. When you publish and you work with a third party like Amazon or somebody like that as an author publisher, you should always have the ability to terminate the contract at will. And the reason for this is that this is actually the publishing industry standard. The publisher can always terminate a publishing contract at will. If they decide sales aren't high enough, if they decide they don't like whoever it is they're working with, subject to the obligation to make any payments that are due, and subject to any other legal obligations that you've incurred, you should have the ability to terminate your contracts at any time, because you are the publisher. And so you get to do that. You get that power. That's a good thing. But you should make sure that your contracts all say so. Be aware that the contracts that you have will define the rights that you have vis-a-vis the other people you work with. So if you work with a professional editor, there should be a contract. It should give you the power to terminate. It should be very clear that you continue to own the work product once you pay them, that it's still yours, it's not theirs. Same thing with cover art. You should be clear in the cover art contract. Do you own that art outright? Can the cover designer use that art for other people, or is it exclusive to you? For how long is it exclusive to you if it's exclusive only temporarily? These are things that you need to make sure are stated in the contract. And if you don't understand contracts and you don't know how to write them yourself, meaning if you're not a lawyer, you should hire a lawyer to write them for you. And so you should be willing to expend a little money up front to do that. I often get the question at this point, although I haven't yet, how much do these contracts cost? And the answer really is, unfortunately, it varies. It can be very expensive. It can be very inexpensive. If you're acting as an author publisher and you're going to publish multiple books, one way to make this more cost effective, and by the way, lawyer fees, tax deductible, make sure you deduct them, make sure you get a written bill. When you have a lawyer drafting a contract for you, what you should ask is if they will prepare it in a fill-in-the-blank form that you can then use with other people. So for example, when I do cover art contracts, I very often will put most of the boilerplate or the standard legal provisions in the contract itself. And then the deal-specific provisions I put in an exhibit. Or an attachment, so that the author publisher can then in the future use that exact same contract with that cover artist or a different cover artist moving forward. And all they have to do is change the terms of the exhibit, and they don't have to go back to the lawyer again a second time. You can do that with cover art. You can do that with editors. By the way, most professional editors should already have their own contract, so you shouldn't have to pay for that contract to be drafted. But if they don't, it might be worth having one drafted that protects you. All of these contracts you can get in fill-in-the-blank form, and that way with every new release you do, you can just pull that contract off the shelf. You'll want to have a lawyer look at it every few years, or if the industry changes, or if you want to make significant changes to it. But other than that, you can do them as fill-in-the-blank forms and save yourself a lot of money. So the next thing we need to talk about, we've talked about contracts, we want to talk about industry standards. You should know them. Whether you author publish or whether you traditionally publish, you should understand how both sides of the publishing industry work. You should understand what is involved in author publishing, and you should understand what is involved in traditional publishing. And this surprises a lot of author publishers because they say, wait a minute, I'm author publishing. I don't care about traditional publishing. Why should I care about traditional publishing? And the answer is, traditional publishing sells more books than you do. And you should want to learn from anyone who sells more books than you do. You should learn how they do it, so that you can do what they do well and not do what they do poorly. Because there are things that traditional publishing does well, and there are things that it does poorly. And my father used to say, you can learn something from every person you encounter in your life. From some people, you will learn things you want to emulate. From some things, you will learn you will learn things you don't want to emulate. And from most people, you will learn a little bit of both. And that is very true about publishing. If you want to play in the field of publishing, especially if you want to be a publisher, which is what an author publisher is, you should understand how publishing works, as much about publishing works as you can learn from as many different sources as you can. And then you should filter out, basically, pardon my French, the crap from the gold. Don't keep the crap, keep the gold, figure out how to spend it on your own behalf. This is the secret, right? Everyone says, what's the secret to success in publishing? And the real secret is, there is no secret. It comes down to being smart and fast and capable of adapting. And in order to adapt, you have to know what it is that you're supposed to be adapting to. So learn the industry, learn all the standards that you can, and figure out how to adapt them for your own needs. Read, read, read. Read author-published books, read traditionally published books, and make your books, your author-published books, look as much like traditionally published books as you can, meaning the good parts, obviously. You don't want to author-publish a book quickly because you want it out there and then have a bunch of typos and have a bunch of things you need to change and decide that, well, I don't really like this title, I'm going to put up a different title. Every time I speak to groups live, I get the question, do I need to re-register copyright when I put out another edition? And I normally say, well, how many editions are you putting out? How long has it been since the last edition? And in one particular case, I had a gentleman say that he had put out 9 editions of his first book within 3 months. The same book. It was just that he said, well, I keep finding typos, so I put out a new edition. Don't do this. That's not professional. Take the time to make sure that your book has been professionally edited, laid out, good cover art, that you have a final cover, that you've done a copy edit, meaning looking for typos and errata, all of this before you publish it the first time. Also, you should be planning pre-orders. You should be planning pre-releases. You should treat your book as though it were a traditionally published book, in the sense that you should get all the things that other authors get. Pre-orders, pre-release, cover reveal. All of these things are open to you. You are the publisher. You get to set the publishing schedule. Make sure that you give yourself enough time for the process. This is, again, where a business plan comes in handy. If you have a business plan, you can be planning where your pre-release marketing should be, where your release phase marketing should be, how much time you need for editing, how much time you need for cover design. And then you can build your launch schedule for the entire year that your book is going to come out. The good news is it doesn't take author publishers as long as it takes traditional publishing. doesn't take 12 to 14 to 16 months for your book to come out. It can come out in 6. But you need to make sure that that 6 months is enough time for the process to be done properly. Whatever the timing is for you, and your timing doesn't need to be the same as any other author publisher. It doesn't need to be the same as any traditional publisher. It doesn't even need to be the same as it was for your last book, but it needs to be right for this book, and it needs to be right for you. And the good news is you have all the time in the world to figure that out. And if you take the time up front to write the business plan, you'll be prepared. Be aware when you're signing contracts with other people and you're working with other people. Author publishers do need help. It's just a reality. Everyone needs help, by the way. That's not just author publishers. Nobody has all the skills it takes to release a book. Nobody. Nobody is equally good at writing and cover design and copy editing and developmental editing. And there's an old saying about lawyers who represent themselves. And the saying is that any lawyer who represents himself has an idiot for an attorney and a fool for a client. And it's fairly true that if you think you are capable of doing the entire thing yourself with no help, and it's not going to take you a long time to do it, you may need to take a closer reevaluation of your skills. And that's really the nicest way that I can put it, because I have seen a lot of people who thought that they were really, really good with all of these things. And the reality is we very often have blind spots we're not aware of. So find a good peer group that can really give you good feedback on what you're good at and on what maybe you want to find some outside people to help you with. Because the reality is it's not one size fits all. You have a great skill set. Whatever your skill set is, it's great and you should know it. Me, personally, I'm not good with layout. I'm terrible with cover design, like documented terrible. I should never be allowed to design the cover for one of my own books because I have horrible instincts, and I recognize that. And so since that's true, I need to make sure that whether I author publish or whether I traditionally publish, somebody else is doing the cover design because I suck at it. So it's okay to realize where your weaknesses are. In fact, it's great because that lets you know where you can find help. When you are signing contracts with somebody else, if somebody else presents you with a contract, always get a professional to help you review it, unless you are yourself a publishing lawyer. By the way, I get phone calls regularly from other lawyers who specialize in other areas, PI or even contract lawyers, saying, I don't understand publishing. Help me out. Is this a good contract or not? So don't be ashamed to say you need help, no matter what it is that you need help with, because we all need help. It's a matter of finding the right people to help you. Something else to be aware of, and I noticed that we're at about the 3:30 time, and hopefully everybody is still hearing well and the sound is still coming through well. Or about 3:30, I think we're scheduled to go till about 4. I'll go a little bit longer than that if I need to, just to make sure that I get all the information in. But if you do have questions, please feel free. I do see them popping up as they come up, so I'll answer them as we go. One thing that is difficult for all authors, and so I include this in all of my author talks, whether it's for author publishers or traditionally published authors or hybrids, is the idea of scam avoidance. Because authors are at heart artists. We all want to have, happy feelings about our books, and we want our books to do well. And we're artists, and a lot of times we feel like I don't have a good business head on my shoulders, but that's okay. Sorry, it's not okay. You can learn business and you need to do it. But you should be aware that scams and scammers and really nasty, slimy people tend to inhabit the spaces where art and business interconnect. And the reason for that is that scammers know that artists don't often have good business heads on their shoulders, and they know that they can take advantage of you. And I see a lot of people trying to take advantage of author publishers in particular. And the way that this happens is, there are several ways. And so let's talk a little bit as we're coming down sort of into the back 9 of our webinar about scams and how you can avoid them. One of the very popular scams that independent authors get hit with a lot is the publishing contract scam. Someone who claims they're going to help you publish your book. They're a company that helps independent authors get their books in print. So they may come at you pretending to be a traditional publisher. They may come at you pretending to be a book packager, someone who helps get books to the market. They may come at you pretending to be a distributor. They may come at you pretending to be a printer. But all of these have hallmarks, and the hallmarks of these bad contracts and these scams are that they want you to pay more money than is industry standard for a service that they're offering. And anytime you see a dramatically too high contract price, you need to walk away, because these are not good people. They're in this to hurt you. They're in this to take advantage of you. And one of the ways that I tend to look at that is by saying, make sure before you do business with anyone that you get referrals. You should get at least 3 referrals of other people they've worked with. You should look at those other products they've produced, and you should talk to the people who they give you as referrals. And you should make sure those people are not relatives or friends of the group that's trying to work with you. If you can get 3 referrals and they're pretty good, and you can document that the price is industry standard, then you're at least on a better footing. Something that I see very often, though, there is a group that likes to send contracts to say, oh, we'll help you. We help independent authors promote their books. And they'll say, we found your book on Amazon and we think you're not getting enough attention and we can help you promote. And you think, wow, that's awesome. Somebody loves me. Somebody noticed my book. And you're immediately biased toward them because they complimented you. And we all like people who compliment us and say we're awesome and talented and wonderful. And you probably are awesome and talented and wonderful, but that's not why these people are coming after you. They're coming after you because they want your monies. So before you sign up with this or any other group, what you want to do is make sure that you get referrals from people that I've actually worked with, and you also want to Google their company name, comma, scam. Because if it's a scam, people will be talking about it, and you want to do your research. It's especially important as author publishers that you do your research, because you don't have other people standing in the gap to protect you the way that traditionally published authors often do. Because these groups do approach traditionally published authors too. But that author then goes to their agent and says, hey, do you know anything about this? And the agent says, yeah, it's a scam. And the author goes, oh, never mind, and they delete the email. But if you don't have that backstop, that other person you can go to, you have to be able to do that legwork on your own. People say, well, how do I know if it's greater than industry standard cost? Ask someone. Message me on Twitter, or ask somebody else that you know and trust who's in the industry, or Google it. Find out, do the research. And by the way, nothing frustrates me more than people who get taken advantage of because they just didn't want to do the research. I had one person come to me and they had signed a contract with one of the groups that's now known to be a scam. And they had paid $25,000 out of pocket up front for printing of their books. And probably no big surprise, the book was never printed. They're out the $25,000. And they came to me and said, what can I do? And my response was, you can sue them. And they said, well, we don't have money to sue them. I said, well, there's really nothing else you can do. They've taken advantage of you. That's not as bad as the ones that came to me that they couldn't even sue them because they did get something in return for their money and they just made a bad deal. Please, please, please do not let someone take advantage of you by offering you marketing services, book printing services, distribution services at higher than market rates or non-standard terms, or if their company is in fact a fraud, a scam, or something that just says they do something for you but doesn't do anything more than you can do for yourself. As an author publisher, one of the really important hallmarks of anyone you do business with is that you shouldn't ever, even though I've said you need, find out who you need help and get help, or where you need help and get help. Never do business with anyone who can't do more for you than you can do for yourself. There's no reason to. And that's true for traditionally published authors also. And there are a lot of very small presses out there that don't give authors any more than they could do if they author published, and in fact do less for them because they have to give up the bulk of their money. You as an author publisher need to be very aware of what your skills are and what you need, and also the reputation and quality of the people you're working with. And don't ever work with anyone in any context in publishing who can't do more for you than you could do for yourself in that area. Because if that's the case, you're wasting your time, your money, and your energy. You would be better off doing it yourself or not doing it at all. Another place that author publishers often run into some difficulty is the idea of writing contests and reviews. And writing contests come in 2 forms. There are contests for stories that are not yet published, and then there are the contests that give prizes, like indie book awards and things like that you submit your book for consideration for an award. And what I tell people about this is read the entry terms carefully. Do your research. Make sure that you're only submitting to legitimate contests and legitimate review sites. There are some sites like Kirkus that will review, or at least will let you submit independently published, author-published books for review, but there's a fee involved. If the fee is reasonable, then it makes sense. It's unfortunate that traditionally published books don't have a fee for review, and some of these sites require a fee from author publishers, but part of that has to do with volume. There are just so many more author-published books published every year that they have had to find some way to stem the tide coming in through the floodgates, and having a reasonable review fee has been the way they've decided on, at least in many cases so far. If we're looking at a fee that is $50 or less, then what you need to do, again, is evaluate it on business terms. Is this giving you something that you find to be valuable in a business sense? Are you actually getting something of value? And is it worth it to you to make this business investment? Surprise, I'm not going to tell you this is always good or this is always bad. Businesses and business people have to make business judgments. And so you, as the business owner, get to make those judgments. And you need to consider all of the facts. Here are some facts that will help you decide if something is reasonable or not. Again, I mentioned an entry fee or a fee for participation of $35 to $50. If it's under the $50 mark, then it's probably close to in line with industry standards. Over $50 and you're starting to get into an area, for contests especially, where it's excessive. You want to make sure that entry does not impact your copyright. Never, ever, ever give your copyrights away. You should also be careful if the contest requires you to give permission for the entry to be published online, because once it's published online for free, it can be very hard to monetize that in the future. So pay attention to that and use your business judgment. If you're talking about, a haiku, well, maybe you don't care if your haiku is published online. If it's a novella, well, now you're going to lose money if it's published online. So you might want to think about that. If it's published online for a short period of time, might be worth it. You need to read the terms of entry carefully and thoroughly and make sure that you understand them. And if you don't understand them, either don't enter or get some professional help before you do. Next thing I want to talk about is reviews. You need to be careful about paid reviews, because paid reviews tend to be less legitimate than unpaid reviews, and everybody knows this. And the problem is that when you pay for book reviews, you need to make sure that you're not paying for good reviews or bad reviews, that if you're going to pay a fee like Kirkus's fee for author publishers, that you're simply paying a fee for consideration, that it's a processing fee, and that it's not being paid to ensure a certain kind of review. It can be very tempting for authors, all authors, not just self-published or author publishers or traditionally published authors. It can be tempting for all authors to try and get as many good reviews as they can, because they think that's going to sell more books and they think that's going to help them. And there's this myth that Amazon says if you get, 5 or 25 or 50 or 100 reviews, that they do more to promote you. And, I wouldn't rely on those myths. I wouldn't rely on urban legend. Amazon is very careful not to tell you exactly what they're doing. Reviews are good, but it's not worth, it's not worth impugning your personal honor or going against your personal ethics in order to get more reviews. And I strongly recommend that any group that tells you they can guarantee a certain number of reviews, they can guarantee a certain number of good reviews, they can guarantee a certain type of reviews, or, it's not worth paying for, because it's often a scam. And when it's not a scam, it's still a little sketchy. So just be aware of that. Don't be sketchy. Be a professional. You should be aware that sometimes it can be difficult to get your books into bookstores when you are an independently published author or an author publisher. You should be aware, though, that there are distribution methods that are available to you, and you should be up and aware of what those are. So Ingram has, I believe it's Ingram Spark, which is the author publisher version of Ingram's distribution. Be aware that making your books available with a distributor is not the same thing as making sure that the book will be in bookstores. In fact, it's very different. In a traditional distributor arrangement, what happens is that a distributor makes books available to bookstores, which means that a bookstore can order a book as long as the book is returnable. They will very often, bookstores will order books from catalogs. Most bookstores do not look at Ingram Spark or the author-publisher version of distributors in order to find books to stock in their bookstores. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is because author-published books very often are not returnable. So one thing you need to make sure that you do, if you can, when you are putting your books up with distributors, is make your books returnable. Now, this will be more expensive for you because very often you will be charged for the return of those books, and you will not be able to get your profit if the book is returned to you. You'll need to make sure that it's handled in a way. Some of them may be damaged and you might not be able to resell them. So there will be some loss, some shrinkage when you make your books returnable. However, you are far more likely to have your books stocked in different places if they are returnable. So that's a business decision that you have to make. The second thing to be aware of is that there are a lot of independent bookstores now that are carrying author-published works, especially for local authors. The way that you approach those bookstores is very important. What you need to do is go in and talk to the owner or talk to the manager. And don't do it with a chip on your shoulder, and don't do it in an entitled way. Nobody owes you anything. And that's true of publishing generally. It doesn't matter if you're traditionally published, if you're self-published, if you're hybrid, if you're a New York Times best-selling author, or you're a debut author whose very first title is just coming out. And I'll repeat it because it's important. Ain't nobody in publishing owes you anything unless they have signed a contract with you promising to give you something. And even then, they owe you only what the contract says. Readers don't owe you their time. Reviewers don't owe you reviews. Bookstores don't owe you shelf space. Ain't nobody owes you anything. However, there are ways to get people to do things for you. There are ways to get people to want to do things for you. And there are ways to be successful so that everybody likes you and wants to buy your books. And all of that comes back down really to two things. The first one is professionalism, and the other one is not being a jerk. When you're nice to people, when you are pleasant and respectful and professional, people want to be nice to you back. They want to be professional and respectful. So if you want to get your books into a local bookstore, the best thing to do is go in, smile, be friendly. You might even want to consider buying a book. I know that's really, really radical, but think about it. When I'm in a independent bookstore, I always buy at least one book, either for myself or to give away as a friend to a friend. But I always buy a book when I'm in there. And that does get a little bit expensive, but it is important for us as authors to support the bookstore culture and to support books and to support other authors. You know, I buy ebooks. I buy both traditionally published books and author published books. I buy books all the time. And you as author publishers, the best thing you can do, and I say this to traditionally published authors and I say it to author publishers, support other authors, support bookstores. And then, pardon me, when the time comes that you need someone to help you with a launch, there will be people who are willing to do it. Not everybody, because not everybody got the memo that you shouldn't be a jerk. Unfortunate, but true. However, the nicer you are, the more professional you are, the more you extend yourself as a professional, the more likely you are to get that professional respect that you deserve. So when you want to go to bookstores, I recommend going in if it's a local bookstore instead of just calling on the phone. Because if you go in, they can see you. They can look at you face to face. You can chat with the owner and you can ask them, do you stock independently published authors? I'm a local author. I have a book that's coming out. Take a copy of the book if you can. Again, don't expect, but ask. Be willing to put yourself out there because there are quite a few bookstores out now, especially local independents, that do accept books from independent author publishers. And I think that's a wonderful thing. If you're considering having a launch party, have it at one of these stores. Many times the stores, even if they don't put your book on the shelf, will be willing to let you have an event there and sell the books on consignment or sell the books on your behalf. But you have to be willing to ask, and you have to be willing to ask the right way, which is to go in and say, is this a possibility? Something else to be aware of as an independent author publisher that can help you sell a lot of books. Think outside the box when it comes to sales venues. I know an author who has written a mystery, and she's an author publisher, very successful in this area. And her mystery involves a donut, death by donuts. And so when she wanted to do her launch event, she talked to the people up at Apple Hill, which is near here, which is a place outside of Sacramento where there are lots of apple farms. And one of the things that some of those farms are famous for are apple donuts in the autumn. And so she talked with one of the farms, and when they were having a festival involving their apple donuts, she arranged to set up a stand where she could sell her books at the festival. This is great co-branding, right? She's encouraging donuts, they're encouraging her mystery, it works really well. Farmers markets, local events, Many, many, many book festivals now have spaces for author publishers. What you will need to do in order to be successful is not to stereotype yourself into the role of I can't, but to start figuring out the different ways that you can, and not to limit yourself to, oh, well, if it's not a bookstore, then it's not okay. Many, many authors I know sell far more books outside of bookstores than in them. And that's because they find the local festivals that mesh with their needs. You know, if you have a book about, well, I'm gonna throw Laura under the bus here. If you have a book, a great book that's a mystery book that might be set at a fan convention, there might be fan conventions that would be a great place that you might be able to have vendor space. And that is a natural fit for the audience that's already there. So what you as an author publisher need to do, right? And by the way, I am going to put in a shameless plug here. Laura's Con Job is a fabulous book, and she has no idea that I was about to say that. So she's probably really embarrassed right now, but you should all go read that book if you haven't already. The key as an author publisher is being able to think outside the box. One of the advantages to author publishing is that we as authors are much more adaptable. You know, there's been talk about traditional publishing as being dinosaurian and the author publisher world as being the little furry mammals. And, you know, I don't put much stock in those sorts of analogies, but I do put stock in this. And that's that authors are much more adaptable than publishers are generally. And that's not because of old method, new method. It's because an author is one person, and an author can adjust and manipulate and move much faster and adapt much faster than any corporate organization ever can. So that's an advantage on the ground that you have. The key is that you not try to force yourself into the old mold. It has to be done this way. What you need to be doing is thinking about, how can I do it that might be successful for me? Where is your audience? Know who they are, know where they are. Be able to distinguish them from people who are not my audience, and try to find the places where they're located. So these are the things that you as an author publisher can and should be doing. Don't look at the negative. Don't focus on, this is what I don't have. Focus on, this is what I can do. Find your strengths and play to them. Find your audience and market to them. Find the ways to protect your rights and protect them. And most of all, remember always, you are running a small business. You are a publisher. So don't ever let anyone look down on you for what you're doing, because you're doing far, far more than many authors will ever do. You are running a publishing house. You are the author. You are the cover approver, if not the cover designer. You are the acquiring editor. You are the decision maker. You're the VP of marketing, you're the head of distribution, and you're the head of sales. And that's a lot of hats to wear. And you get to wear them all. And that's actually pretty darn cool. One last thing that I want to talk about briefly before we conclude today, and that is how to manage your backlist. A lot of times, author publishers forget about the fact that every new book you release pushes the previous books onto your backlist. Your front list is your current titles, your titles released this year. Your backlist are your titles that were previously published. Don't forget about your backlist when you're doing advertising, but remember that backlist titles don't get the same advertising that front list titles do. Front list titles are great advertising for backlist titles already, because their existence, if people read them and like them, will send people looking for your other books. The things to think about with your backlist titles. 1, are they still visible? Can people still find them? If not, find a way to make that happen. Your website should indicate them. They should be easily linked from your other books on Amazon. You should make sure that your titles are tied together in ways that make buyers easy to find them. 2nd, consider tying your backlist titles into a promotion, and do it strategically. So if you're getting ready to release a new book in your series, consider putting the first book on series on sale, because that way people will read the first book and get sucked in, but don't always have the first book on sale. Put it on sale maybe 30 days before your next book releases. That gives you buzz, because you can now promote 2 titles, the one that's on sale and the one that's coming out. It creates buzz for the book because people buy the backlist title and they come in to buy the first front list title when it comes out, right? And it's also smart because people love a sale. But if something's on sale all the time, it's not really on sale at all. It's the same price. So consider, if your books are all priced at 99 cents, you might want to consider actually raising those prices up a little bit. And then you have the ability to drop them when you want to put the book on sale. Many, many times author publishers undersell themselves with price, and they believe that their books aren't worth more than 99 cents. And that is the wrong way to look at it. You put the same effort into your books, or you should, as anyone who's published by Macmillan or Penguin or anybody else. And so you deserve to make a fair price on that book that you're releasing. So don't undersell yourself. Give your book the pricing that it's worth, and then have the ability to put it on sale. Finally, when you're working on all of this and putting it all together, make sure that you realize sometimes books don't do well. And just because one book doesn't do well doesn't mean that it's a terrible book, or you're a terrible writer, or you should give it up, or that book should come off your backlist, or anything else. Everybody has books that don't do as well as other books. The key as an author publisher is being able to figure out when you shouldn't be wasting advertising dollars on the backlist titles that don't do well. Advertise the books that do well, and let those books be the advertisement for the ones that maybe didn't do as well. Again, if you've been tracking your numbers properly, you'll be able to tell whether a book didn't do well because it didn't get exposure and you didn't advertise it, or whether the book didn't do well because maybe that's just not the book that readers related to best. And I'm not going to say it wasn't your best work, because quite frankly, one of my books that I love the most has not done as well as some of the others. So I just have to say maybe that one is a book of my heart that didn't belong to everybody else's heart. Nobody else thought my child was quite as cute as I did, but that's okay. So we are getting close to the end of our time, and I don't see any questions in the queue, but if people have questions, now would be the time for opening it up. One thing I really want to say in concluding is this. Author publishing is an important part of the publishing industry now. We see a lot of books that deal with a lot of topics that we would never get to see, books that are fascinating, books that really speak to people, because the traditional publishing industry is not good at reaching all markets. They're not good at reaching niche markets for people who don't maybe follow the usual path. And so never, ever apologize for or feel like you're less than for being an author publisher. Author publishers tend to work harder and longer hours for less recognition sometimes than traditionally published authors get. You have taken on a difficult but a wonderful path. People may tell you that the publishing sky is falling and that this is a terrible time and that book sales are shrinking and this is bad and that is bad. And I will tell you that the sky has been falling in publishing since Gutenberg published the Bible, because right after that, there were people who said, oh, publishing has reached its pinnacle and we will never publish anything as wonderful as Gutenberg's Bible again. So the sky has been falling forever, guys, and yet it hasn't fallen. And from my perspective, there has never been a better time to be an author. And there's never been a better time to be an author publisher. Remember, and don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise, that what you are doing is important. It is legitimate. You are running businesses, small businesses, the kind of small businesses that hundreds of years ago grew into the big businesses that are publishing today. Does that mean that someday you'll be as big as Macmillan? Probably your children, but I hope so. You know, I know that it is difficult. I know that it is a hard industry, and I know that there are a lot of balls and plates to keep spinning in this industry. But I respect each and every one of you for what you're doing. I encourage you. I'm available on Twitter if you have questions, and I really hope that you have a wonderful weekend and that this mini conference is very profitable. I wish you all great success. And again, never forget, you are not only an author, you are a publisher, and that is a very, very cool thing. So thank you very much. Oh, I also see a question here. ISBN number options, buy my own or use the free CreateSpace. If you're going to be an author publisher and you're going to publish more than one book, I'd say go buy a block. I don't believe they expire, and you get a block of, I think it's 10 or 100, and it's much cheaper. And then you have them for all of the books that you create. They're not expensive. And in light of that, you may want to do two things. I don't remember if they allow you to jointly buy them as multiple people, but you may be able to go in with friends and get them. But even if not, they're not that expensive. I would say buy your own, because then you have them and they're not tied to CreateSpace. And while I don't think there are necessarily any bad implications to that, I would not put Amazon and others above deciding later on that they weren't going to allow you to cross-use those ISBNs. So I would say just go ahead and buy your own. And I don't know if we have any more questions. Oh, a couple of them. Quick question going back to copyright. Can you register a book that was published more than 3 months ago? Yes, you can and you should. The only thing you lose by not registering a work within 3 months of its copyright date is that some of the ability to obtain those statutory damages may go away. You may be forced to stop to prove damages. So you have to prove the person made money off the work. Also, your ability to obtain attorney fees for violations is limited to after you register the copyright. So if there's no current infringement going on, you should still be able to even get attorney fees as long as you register before there's an infringement. So yes, if your book is published more than 3 months ago, please absolutely go ahead and register that copyright. It's not too late. Sharing something that may be worth mentioning. Let's see here. I experienced a fire in the apartment I was in. Scan those contracts and store them on a thumb drive and in a safety deposit box as a backup. Yes, yes, yes. Always keep copies of your contracts. Scan them, put them in the cloud, and also put your originals in a safe deposit box or a fireproof safe. One of the things that I strongly recommend all publishers do, and this is not just author publishers, this is all publishers, all businesses should have a fireproof safe. And if you don't have one, you should have a safe deposit and a fireproof safe, and you should be storing your important documents in them. Very disappointing for burglars if there's no money in it, but very helpful for you because you will have your documents protected in the event of a fire. Definitely, definitely be prepared for that and be thinking about that. And thank you for bringing that up. That's a very important comment. So I don't know if we have other questions or if that's it. We're right at the 4 o'clock point. So we've gone, I think, about 2 hours. I know we started a few minutes late. And thank you all so much for coming. I hope this was helpful. And again, I am very easy to find on Twitter. I'm at Susan Spann. My email is simply susan@susanspann.com. What kind of copyright language should be used in the front matter? This is actually a really good question. You should always have copyright, the author's name, and the year. As far as but I think you may also be talking about that disclaimer that says this is a work of fiction. Any similarity to living persons is strictly coincidental. My recommendation for this actually is that it varies depending on the type of book you're writing. What you may want to do is actually get a book that is a traditionally published book that's very similar to yours and look at that language and see what they've got in there. It does vary from book to book. If you're writing a self-help book or you're writing a cookbook or you're writing a nonfiction book of any kind, especially advice or medical-based ones, you do want to hire a lawyer to write a disclaimer for the front of the book that basically says, you know, if you kill yourself using this book, it's not my fault, really. Those disclaimers are fairly helpful and fairly useful, and they do sometimes stand up in court, but you want to make sure that you get a lawyer to write it. If you have any questions about what kind of specific copyright language, in addition to copyright, the author's name, and the year needs to be in there, you want to make sure that that you contact a lawyer and ask, or just ask me. I very often take a look at copyright type language, that sort of thing, you know, when I can on a pro bono basis. Victoria, I missed most of the webinar. Was it recorded? I think it was recorded. Laura, I see you on your screen. Can you nod for me if the recording worked or if we know? She may not be able to hear me. I hope I'm being able to be heard. I believe it was recorded. So I do believe that the recording is available and that you'll be able to find it in a recording section, and hopefully that is the case. So I will also start running a blog series on my blog every Wednesday. I do a publishing law related blog, and I had been meaning to do this anyway. So I will do this series on my blog over time, so that in addition to finding the recording here, and hopefully it was recorded, you will have the ability to get all of this information off of my blog. And I will put it in a special category on the blog called Publishing Law, and I think I'll put it under Author Publishing so that you can see that. Copyright questions. Someone just published an ebook and registered copyright, plans to print in paperback later. Yes, if you registered the copyright for the ebook only, you are covered for the paperback as well, and you should not need to send physical books. I believe that is the case because the issue is if you're not currently printing in paper, you can handle the registration with the ebook upload, and then if you later on down the line decide to print the paperback, I believe you have the option to register copyright for a new edition which may or may not be less expensive, but I know you can register copyright in what's called a new edition of the work for the print version. However, you should be protected for both. And thank you, David. I'm glad that this was helpful, and I hope that it was useful for everybody. So I will be around. I'm around on Twitter, and I know that Laura has the ability to get questions to me. So at the risk of making more work for her, if there's some convenient way for people to get questions to her over the course of the weekend, I would be glad to get to emails, or you can email me directly, and I'd be glad to give people follow-up questions on things that came up as a result of the webinar. And that's true both for people who were here and also for those of you who are listening to this later on down the line. You can just give me an email, susan@susanspann.com, and if it's something that I can just answer without having to do research or review documents or things like that, then I'm glad to help, and just to do it as a courtesy for people who attended the conference. And I hope you all have a great weekend, and I'm sorry that I couldn't be there with you. And I don't know if we're still recording or not. As a courtesy for people who attended the conference. And I hope you all have a great weekend, and I'm sorry that I couldn't be there with you.
Thank you, Susan. That was really awesome. I got a ton of info out of it. So I'm excited. Underneath, sorry, well, hold on one second. Well, underneath Susan's face has been her blog address and some information, a link to her book. So if you want to check that out, she's going to have that series online. And then if you guys are also registered or want to attend my personality and branding webinar, that's going to get started in about 10 minutes or so. It just gives me a chance to stop this, reset up the webinar, and that'll launch here in about 10 minutes. There's a link, should be right underneath my face right now, that will open that webinar in a new window. So make sure you click that link to open that webinar in a new window, so that way they will record separately from this webinar. And yeah, then I'll have this one available up for replay. So thank you guys very much, and I will see you in 10 minutes or so.